You've probably noticed everything from your rent, groceries, insurance premiums to mortgage rates keep going higher and higher. Sure, inflation, right? But there's actually a lot more to it than that. What if I told you there's a hidden force behind these changes, one that involves the US dollar and its role on the world's global stage? And it's not just about politics or market trends, it's about a fundamental economic paradox that's been challenging economists for over half a century. This paradox, known as Triffin's Dilemma, explains why having a strong US dollar, while seemingly beneficial, is actually backfiring on us here in America. And because of this, it's crushing the American dream for many. Today we're diving deep into this dilemma to uncover why the US must keep printing dollars, why it must keep running massive trade deficits, and why foreigners need to keep buying our stuff in order to maintain the stability of the US dollar. So let's break down why the dollar's strength is both a blessing and a curse, and what this means for you. By the way, I have to credit Brent Johnson of the Dollar Milkshake Theory for inspiring this video. His insights on this topic are superb. If you want an even deeper dive, be sure to check out his video. I'll link that at the end. Testifying before the US Congress in 1960, economist Robert Triffin exposed a fundamental problem in the international monetary system, specifically a huge issue with having the US dollar as the world's go-to reserve currency. Imagine the global economy as a giant machine that needs oil to keep running smoothly. In our case, that oil is the US dollar because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. Countries around the world need lots of dollars to trade with each other and to keep their economy stable. But here's the catch. In order to keep enough dollars flowing around the world, the US ends up buying more from other countries than we sell to them. This is what's called running a trade deficit. While this practice keeps dollars moving around the world, it also means that the US has to rack up considerable debt because we often have to borrow money to cover these deficits. Plus, it makes our economy heavily reliant on goods from abroad. Now, you might be wondering, why should I care about trade deficits? Here's why. As the US continually needs to print more dollars to fulfill international demands, it as a result fuels inflation. This inflation is then exported overseas, driving up their prices and costs abroad. This in turn impacts their economies. Back home here in America, the repercussions are that America probably loses manufacturing jobs, the cost of imports rise, and domestic inflation climbs. This vicious cycle has been unfolding for decades. Today we're seeing the effects. Young Americans are squeezed out of the housing market. People are unwilling to work for wages that haven't kept up with rising inflation. Americans are facing escalating homelessness, and we're experiencing wealth inequality at historic levels. This may be an oversimplification, but this is just how I'm seeing it. Triffin's Dilemma forces the US to balance supplying the world with US dollars against the economic consequences we face in America. It's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place where every benefit comes with a cost. Now you have to ask yourself, was the juice worth the squeeze? Are the advantages of having the US dollar as the global reserve currency worth the economic challenges we're facing today? Let me know what you think in the comments below. You might be wondering, how is this affecting us right now? And that's a great question. It all comes down to the global dominance of the US dollar, even today. Did you know that around 60% of the world's foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars? That means every decision we make here in America, from raising interest rates and trade policies to managing our huge national debt, creates powerful ripple effects throughout the global economy. And those ripples don't just impact other countries, they eventually circle back, affecting our everyday life. And that's what we're seeing today. Right now, there's a big debate going on about whether a strong or weak dollar benefits Americans. A strong dollar sounds great because it makes it cheaper for us to buy imported goods and travel overseas. But here's the kicker. It also makes our American products more expensive and less appealing overseas, which hurts our exports. Basically, when the dollar is too strong, it's really tough for American companies, specifically those who export, to compete globally. And that means fewer jobs and slower economic growth in the United States. But here's the catch. America needs to keep pumping dollars into the global economy, which means the US must keep printing money and keep running these large trade deficits. And that brings up a tricky question. How long can we keep this up before it becomes unsustainable? Plus, recent crises like the pandemic have forced the Federal Reserve to pump even more money into the economy to keep things moving, which raises even more concerns about inflation. More dollars chasing the same goods and services erodes the dollar's value and pushes up everyday prices for like groceries higher and higher. So understanding Triffin's dilemma helps us to understand these complicated dollar issues the US finds itself in and how it directly affects us. Being the world's reserve currency, the US dollar is like the star of the global economic stage. This status allows the US to borrow more cheaply and spread its influence worldwide, but this starring role isn't without its challenges and responsibilities. For one, changes in US monetary policy, like adjusting interest rates or quantitative easing measures, can have significant impacts far beyond our borders. For example, when the US raises interest rates, it doesn't just affect Americans. It also affects any country that has taken loans in dollars or holds significant dollar reserves. This can lead to higher borrowing costs and economic instability in those countries. Then there's the dependence on the dollar, which puts other countries in a tough spot. Countries need to maintain sufficient dollar reserves to manage their trade and debt payments, which ties their hands in terms of economic policy. And then there's the issue of exorbitant privilege, a term used to describe the unique advantage the US enjoys by being able to print the currency that the world relies on. While it sounds like a wonderful advantage, and in many ways it is, but it also means the US is expected to manage its currency in a way that keeps the global economy stable, not just its own. Naturally, this leads to conflicts between domestic economic goals and global economic stability. Let's not forget about gold in this whole economic mix-up. Historically, gold is where you turn to when things get shaky, economically speaking. It's like that old reliable friend you can always count on when things get tough. Since the US dollar cut ties with gold back during the Nixon era, we've all been playing this game of trust with paper or fiat money. This shift has made the gold market kind of a wild ride with ups and downs as investors flock to gold whenever they start doubting the strength of these paper currencies. Today we're seeing gold prices climbing to all-time highs, which really highlights just how nervous folks are feeling about the future of currencies like the dollar. With these dynamics at play, the pressure on the US dollar to maintain dollar supremacy can lead to policies that might not always align with the long-term economic health here in the United States. So what are the possible solutions to this dilemma? One idea that gets floated around is creating a global reserve currency alternative, something not tied to any single country. The International Monetary Fund has proposed a digital currency called special drawing rights that could act as a neutral global reserve currency. In theory, this could take pressure off of the US dollar and create a more balanced system. But the reality is, convincing the entire world to trust a new system is easier said than done. Another solution would be for the US to adopt a more balanced trade policy, producing more goods domestically and exporting more to the rest of the world. This could help shrink trade deficits and strengthen the US economy. But here's the catch. If the US started running consistent trade surpluses, it would reduce the global supply of dollars, potentially triggering financial instability in countries that depend on those dollars for their economies. Some believe we're already seeing the beginnings of a multi-currency system where currencies like the euro or the Chinese yuan could play bigger roles in international trade. In theory, this would spread the burden across several currencies instead of placing it all on the dollar. But shifts like this don't happen overnight. It could take decades for the global financial system to fully evolve into something more balanced. And of course, there's the classic solution of reducing debt and exercising fiscal discipline, cutting government spending and living within the country's means. While While that might sound like the most responsible approach, it's incredibly difficult to pull off in practice. Politicians don't win elections by promising austerity, and the US government hasn't shown much appetite for tough spending cuts in recent decades. Except for what's going on right now with Doge, and that's a whole nother topic. The hard truth is, there's no silver bullet. Triffin's dilemma isn't just a policy issue, it's a fundamental contradiction baked into the global financial system. The US has been walking this tightrope for decades, trying to balance its own economic needs with its role as the issuer of the world's reserve currency. The question is, how long can the system hold together? As we wrap up, it's clear that Triffin's dilemma isn't just a high-level economic theory, it directly impacts our everyday lives. The continuous need to print dollars to meet international demands not only fuels inflation, but perpetuates a cycle where the value of our currency continuously erodes, making everyday life increasingly unaffordable, which inadvertently is crushing the American dream for many. What do you think about these challenges? Do you believe the US should continue to support the dollar's dominance worldwide? Or is it time for a new approach that might better safeguard our future and restore the American dream? Let me know what you think in the comments. Personally, I think if nothing changes, the American dream is essentially dead, and I've got a great video on that where I share my thoughts, which you can check out up here. And over here, I'll link up Brent Johnson's video.